My family banned me for refusing to be their personal bank. Now they're drowning without my help and desperate to crawl back. I never imagined that one day I'd be sitting here writing about how my own family disowned me over Christmas. Or how I stumbled onto a secret so shocking it felt like something out of a bad crime show. But here we are. I suppose I should start by introducing myself. My name's Nathan, I'm 34. And I work as a mechanical engineer. Nothing glamorous, but it pays well and I live comfortably. I don't have a wife or kids, which, according to my family, makes me an ATM with no responsibilities. For years, I played the role of the reliable son, the helpful older brother, the one who could always be counted on to lend a hand, which in my family meant footing the bill for other people's poor choices. My sister, Sophia, 31, had been the golden child since we were kids. She never had to face consequences. Every time she screwed up, my parents found someone else to blame. The teacher had it out for her, the job was toxic, the landlord was unreasonable. Meanwhile, I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and was mostly invisible unless they needed something. I always thought things would even out as we got older. I was wrong. A month before Christmas, I was sitting at my desk, completely absorbed in my work until my phone lit up with an incoming call. Sophia. I hesitated for a moment before answering. It wasn't uncommon for her to call, but something about the frequency of her recent messages had made me uneasy. The moment I picked up, her voice was already bursting with enthusiasm, dripping with that artificial excitement she always used when she wanted something. Hey, big brother. I've got an amazing opportunity for you. I leaned back in my chair, immediately wary. What kind of opportunity? For the kids, she said quickly, as if that explanation alone should be enough to make me agree to whatever she was about to say. It's this incredible education investment program, like a once-in-a-lifetime deal. If we put money in now, it doubles by the time they're ready for college. I frowned, my brain struggling to process what she had just said. We? I asked carefully. Well, you mostly, she admitted, laughing like it was some kind of joke. But listen, Nathan, this is huge. It's an exclusive offer and we have to act fast. I need $115,000 from you. It'll secure both Tommy and Ellie's future. You do care about their future, right? For a second, I actually thought I had misheard her. $115,000? That was more than I had ever given her in a year. Hell, it was more than I had in liquid savings at that moment. My stomach twisted as a sinking feeling settled in my gut. I stayed silent, hoping she would realize how absurd her request was and backtrack, but she didn't. Instead, she pushed harder. Look, I know it sounds like a lot, but it's really not when you think about it, she continued, her voice taking on that persuasive lilt she always used when she was trying to manipulate someone. I mean, you have a great job, no kids, no mortgage. You've always been the one who had it together. This is just a way to help the family. You always help the family. There it was. The obligation card. The guilt trip. I swallowed down my irritation. Sophia, I can't just hand over that kind of money without knowing exactly what it's for. What's the name of this program? How does it work? Can you send me any paperwork? The shift in her tone was immediate. The sugary excitement bled out of her voice, replaced with something colder, sharper. Wow, so that's how it is, she snapped. I should have known you wouldn't help. You've been acting different lately, like you don't even care about us anymore. My grip on my phone tightened. What are you talking about? I just want details. That's a lot of money, Sophia. It's not something you just throw around without knowing where it's going. She scoffed. Oh, come on, Nathan. Do you really think I'd scam you? It's for the kids. Your niece and nephew. Or do they not matter to you? Frustration bubbled in my chest. That's not fair and you know it. I've always been there for them. Then prove it, she shot back. Because right now it just seems like you care more about hoarding your money than you do about family. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could get another word in, she hung up. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, my heart pounding from the sheer audacity of what had just happened. My mind raced through the years of financial help I had given her. Rent money when they were about to get evicted. Cash for groceries when she claimed they were struggling. Money for the kids' medical bills. Thousands and thousands of dollars over the years. And now, because I hesitated to blindly hand over an outrageous amount, I was suddenly the bad guy? Something about this didn't feel right. The amount she asked for was too large, too specific. Why hadn't she mentioned it to me before? And more importantly, why hadn't Ethan, her husband, said anything? He was usually the one who came to me when they needed help with serious expenses. I pulled up his number and shot him a text. Hey, just talked to Sophia. She mentioned something about an education investment program? Can you tell me more about it? I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, my phone vibrated. One new message. Yeah, man. All good. Just super busy with work. That was it. No mention of the program. No clarification. Just a brush off. I should have called him, should have pushed harder. But something in my gut told me not to press just yet. Something was off. I just didn't realize how off things really were until it was too late. Christmas morning had always been a mix of warmth and chaos in my family. The smell of cinnamon and pine needles, the hum of distant laughter. The occasional shriek of excitement from the kids, these were the things I had expected as I pulled up to my parents' house, the trunk of my car weighed down with carefully wrapped gifts. Despite everything that had happened in the past few weeks, I had convinced myself that it was still Christmas, that family meant something, that whatever tension had built up between me and Sophia would fade under the glow of twinkling lights and the laughter of children. I had been wrong. As I stepped onto the porch, arms full of gifts, a strange sense of unease settled in my gut. The house looked the same, wreath on the door, candles flickering in the windows, but there was something off. Something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the unnatural silence, the way the usual noise of Christmas morning felt muted, almost staged. Maybe it was instinct, a deep-rooted knowing that things were about to go terribly wrong. I knocked. The seconds stretched uncomfortably long before the door creaked open, revealing my father. One look at his face and I knew. It wasn't the usual expression of Christmas morning warmth. The quick, approving nod he always gave me when I walked in with arms full of presents. No, this was different. His face was tight, his mouth pressed into a firm line. His eyes holding something I had never seen before, a coldness. "We don't want you here this year," he said. At first, my brain refused to process the words. I actually let out a small, awkward laugh, waiting for him to break into a smile, waiting for him to tell me it was just one of his awful dad jokes. But he didn't. His expression remained unreadable, unwavering. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Then I saw her. Sophia, standing just behind him, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with something vicious, something triumphant. "This is no place for losers," she sneered. The words hit like a physical blow. It was like the air had been sucked out of my lungs, like the weight of every sacrifice, every dollar, every time I had stepped in to help, suddenly collapsed in on itself. I stood there, stunned, my grip tightening around the bags of gifts as a strange sense of detachment took over. Was this really happening? After everything I had done for her? I glanced past them, my eyes scanning the room beyond. My mother stood in the background, adjusting an ornament on the tree, deliberately avoiding my gaze. The same woman who had called me every time Sophia was in trouble, who had never hesitated to remind me that family takes care of each other, now couldn't even look at me. Ethan was there too. Slumped on the couch, his face drawn with exhaustion. He wasn't part of this decision, I could tell just by looking at him. His body language screamed discomfort, but he didn't say a word. He just sat there, eyes trained on nothing, hands clasped together between his knees. And the kids. Somewhere in the house I could hear them laughing, playing. Blissfully unaware that their uncle had just been erased from Christmas. A lump formed in my throat as realization settled in. This wasn't just Sophia's doing. This was all of them. My father, the man who had raised me to be responsible, had turned his back on me. My mother, who had relied on me for years, was pretending I didn't exist. Ethan, trapped in the web of Sophia's manipulation, was too beaten down to step in. I had spent years being the dependable one, the one who fixed things, the one who sacrificed. And now, I was disposable. The shock began to fade, replaced by something colder, sharper. My hands trembled slightly as I took a deep breath, adjusting my grip on the gifts that suddenly felt like dead weight. I should have said something. I should have demanded an explanation, should have fought back, should have done something. But I didn't. I turned on my heel, walked back to my car, and placed the gifts carefully in the trunk. The irony wasn't lost on me. The gifts I had spent weeks picking out, wrapping, making sure everything was perfect, were now completely meaningless. I slid into the driver's seat and just sat there. My hands were still gripping the wheel, knuckles white. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. Anger burned in my chest, hot and suffocating. But beneath it was something heavier, something closer to grief. Then, like a slow-motion playback of a nightmare, the memories started flooding in. Every time I had bailed Sophia out. Every time I had given without hesitation. Every time I had picked up the pieces of her recklessness. And now, when I had dared to say no to an outrageous demand, I was suddenly worthless to them. They had chosen Sophia. They had always chosen Sophia. And no matter what I did, I would never be more than a resource to them. I exhaled sharply, forcing the storm of emotions into something manageable. Something controlled. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I reached for my keys, started the engine, and pulled away from the house that had once been home. From the people who had once been family. But I wasn't just sad. I was furious. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving my parents' house. The engine was off. the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me like an unbearable force. My hands still gripped the steering wheel, but I wasn't driving. I wasn't even thinking. I was just existing in that moment, soaking in the sheer magnitude of what had just been done to me. Then something shifted inside me. A slow, simmering anger replaced the hurt. A kind of anger that clarifies rather than consumes. The kind that makes everything around you sharper, clearer. I needed answers. I needed to know how this happened. How my own family, the people I had sacrificed for it, had so easily discarded me. And I needed to see, in cold, hard numbers, exactly how much of myself I had given to them over the years. When I got home, I went straight to my desk, flipped open my laptop, and pulled up my bank statements. Scrolling through those numbers, my stomach twisted. I knew I had helped them a lot. But seeing it all in one place? It was overwhelming. Rent payments when they were about to be evicted. Money for car repairs when Sophia claimed Ethan's truck broke down. Groceries when she swore they had no food left. School supplies when she said she couldn't afford what the kids needed. Medical bills. Utility bills. Christmas presents. Cash, no questions asked. The numbers stacked up like a slow-building avalanche, each transaction a small piece of my willingness to help, a record of how I had been raised to believe that family takes care of each other. The final total was staggering. Over $40,000 in just 3 years. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. $40,000. That wasn't helping. That was sustaining them. I had, in a very real sense, become their financial backbone, all without realizing it. And yet they still had the audacity to call me a loser. I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself. But my mind wouldn't stop spinning. And then, a memory surfaced. Something that didn't make sense. Ethan had once told me that he started college funds for the kids. He was so proud of it, saying how he put a little bit aside from every paycheck, determined to give them a future he never had. So why was Sophia suddenly demanding $115,000 from me for an education investment program? The pieces weren't adding up. I pulled up my texts, my fingers moving on autopilot, scrolling through old messages from Ethan. And there it was, a message from 2 years ago, clear as day. Just started 529 plans for the kids. Nothing big yet, but putting $100 from every paycheck. Feels good to do this for them. My stomach dropped. She knew. Sophia knew those funds existed. She knew Ethan was saving. So what the hell was that money really for? As I stared at my screen, my phone vibrated. A message from a number I didn't immediately recognize. You need to know what's really going on. Can we meet? The name at the bottom made my breath catch. Emma, Ethan's sister. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but the urgency in that message was unmistakable. Whatever this was, it was bigger than I thought, and I was done being blind to it. Emma worked at a bank, and though she couldn't legally share much, she had seen something troubling, something that made her break every professional rule she had ever followed. First, it was just a gut feeling. She had noticed Sophia making large deposits into private accounts, often right after I transferred money for an emergency. These deposits weren't ordinary, they were always just under the reporting threshold, like she was deliberately trying to avoid setting off red flags. And these accounts? They weren't joint accounts with Ethan. That was the first red flag. The second was the way Sophia structured her withdrawals. Instead of using the money for what she claimed rent, utilities, groceries, she would take out small amounts over time, siphoning cash into what looked like an entirely separate financial life. One that Ethan knew nothing about. The biggest shock was that Sophia had been lying to Ethan about me for years. I had assumed that Ethan at least knew I had been helping. That even if he wasn't involved in the conversations, he had some awareness of the financial lifeline I had provided to their family. But Emma had seen the proof. Sophia had told Ethan I stopped helping years ago. And that explained everything. That explained why Ethan was working himself to the bone, why he always looked exhausted, why he never seemed to question where their money was going. He genuinely believed they were barely scraping by. He believed he had to pull double shifts, skip meals, push his body to the limit because he thought they had nothing. All the while, Sophia had been stockpiling cash, building a hidden reserve that had nothing to do with the family she claimed to love so much. But even that wasn't the worst part. Emma had access to the bank's flag transactions, the ones that raised questions but weren't necessarily illegal. She pulled up Sophia's records and found something that sent a chill down her spine. Sophia had been researching international bank transfers. Not just random ones, specific countries with weak extradition laws. This wasn't just greed. This was an exit strategy. I felt my breath catch as I absorbed that revelation. This wasn't just about money. Sophia was planning to disappear. And she was using me to fund it. The thought made my stomach turn. How long had she been planning this? How many times had I handed over money believing I was helping my family while in reality I was financing her escape? Ethan's exhaustion wasn't just because of his job. It was because Sophia had manipulated him into a state of financial desperation while she secured her way out. She had weaponized his trust, drained his resources, and left him running in circles while she plotted a life that didn't include him. And the worst part? She hadn't planned to take the kids. Emma had found no accounts in their names, no evidence that she had set aside anything for their futures, only herself. She was going to walk away from all of it. I sat there, hands clenched into fists, feeling something cold settle deep in my bones. This was beyond betrayal. This was calculated destruction. Sophia hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen years of Ethan's life, stolen his choices, stolen every ounce of trust he had placed in her. And now it was time for her to face what she had done. Sophia showed up at my doorstep 3 days later. I had been expecting her. People like her always come when they realize their schemes are falling apart. Still, I wasn't prepared for how disheveled and furious she looked. Her hair was a tangled mess, her usual pristine appearance undone. Her eyes, wild with desperation, locked onto mine the second I opened the door. Without waiting for an invitation, she pushed past me, stepping into my living room like she still had some authority here. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she spat, her voice shaking, not just with anger, but with something else. Fear. I didn't react. I just stood there watching her unravel. "Do you think this is funny? Do you think you can just ruin my life and walk away like nothing happened? You have no idea what you've done." The sheer audacity of her words almost made me laugh. Ruin her life? She had lied, manipulated, and stolen from her own husband. She had turned our family against me. She had plotted to disappear while Ethan worked himself into the ground. And now she wanted me to feel guilty? I crossed my arms. "Why were you hiding money, Sophia?" For the first time, she hesitated. The rage in her eyes flickered, momentarily replaced by something else: calculation. She was scrambling, trying to find a way out. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh my God, are you really this paranoid? You're acting like some detective in a cheap thriller. Maybe I was saving for emergencies. Maybe I just wanted something of my own. Is that a crime?" It was pathetic, really. How quickly she reverted to playing the victim. But I wasn't here to argue. I was here to end this. I pulled out my phone. Ethan's college funds. Her body went rigid. She had been ready for every other accusation. She had a lie prepared for every other question. But this was the one thing she hadn't expected. "You knew Ethan had been saving for the kids." I continued, voice calm, even. "Yet you still asked me for $115,000. Why? Where was that money really going, Sophia?" She didn't answer. So I pressed play. Her own voice filled the room. The anger, the desperation, the sheer arrogance as she admitted to everything. The lies, the stolen money, the escape plan. I watched as her face drained of color. She stumbled back like she had been physically struck. And then she snapped. She lunged toward me, screaming, full of rage and panic. "You had no right to record me. You're trying to destroy me. You think you're better than me? You've always thought that, haven't you?" The way she unraveled was almost surreal. I had seen Sophia angry before, but this was different. This was a person who knew the walls were closing in. A person who had lost control for the first time in her life. Her breathing was ragged, her hands clenched into fists. She looked at me like I was the villain, like I was the one who had betrayed her. And then, in a voice full of pure, unfiltered bitterness, she spat out the words that sealed her fate. "They're better off without me anyway." Everything went still. She realized, a second too late, what she had just said. But it was already done. I didn't react. I didn't need to. I simply tapped my screen and sent the recording to Ethan's lawyer. And just like that, Sophia lost everything. Ethan didn't hesitate. That night, while Sophia was still blissfully unaware, he packed up the kids and everything important. Clothes, school supplies, medical records, birth certificates, anything that mattered. He had planned this carefully. With the help of his lawyer and a few close friends, he ensured that when he walked out of that house, he wasn't coming back. By the time Sophia returned, the house was eerily silent. No toys scattered across the floor, no sound of laughter or little feet running through the halls. Just emptiness. She must have known something was off the second she stepped inside. Maybe it was the way the air felt different, like the life had been drained from the walls. Maybe it was the neatly stacked pile of unopened bills that had accumulated while she was busy plotting her escape. Or maybe it was just the sinking feeling in her gut, the realization that she had finally lost. Then came the panic. The sheer, unhinged panic of someone who never thought they'd face the consequences of their actions. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Her voice breaking as she screamed that her children had been kidnapped. that her husband had stolen them from her, that the police needed to find them now. But the officers weren't interested in her theatrics. When they arrived, they were already aware of the situation. Ethan had full legal custody granted before he even left, thanks to the overwhelming evidence of Sophia's financial fraud and deception. She had no ground to stand on, no claim, no authority. That realization must have hit her like a freight train. She tried to backpedal, tried to spin the story in her favor, but it was too late. The police handed her a copy of the custody agreement. A cold, legal confirmation that she had no rights to anything. And that was when the rage set in. She turned on me next. My phone started blowing up with messages, voicemails filled with pure venom. She blamed me for everything, said I had ruined her life, that I had plotted against her, set her up, manipulated Ethan. She called me a backstabber, a traitor, the reason she had nothing left. But the thing was, she had done this to herself. When my parents finally got involved, I thought, for a brief moment, that they would take her side, that they would try to guilt-trip me into fixing the mess she created. After all, they always had before. But even my mother, the woman who had spent decades defending her, couldn't deny the truth anymore. She had seen the evidence herself. The secret accounts, the money siphoned away, the records of her planning to disappear. There was nothing left to defend. That didn't stop Sophia from trying, though. Desperate and humiliated, she turned to the only other option she had left. The man she had planned to run away with. The same guy she had secretly been messaging, plotting a new life with, believing he would rescue her from the situation she had created. She must have thought he would open his arms, tell her everything would be fine, whisk her away like some tragic, misunderstood heroine. But the moment she lost access to the money, he was gone, blocked her on everything. She was alone. For the first time in her life, Sophia had no one left to manipulate, no one left to bail her out, and she had no one to blame but herself. Epilogue. Moving forward, Ethan and the kids are finally stepping into the kind of life they always deserved. No more living in the shadows of financial stress. No more feeling like they were walking on eggshells around a woman who only saw them as obstacles to her own selfish plans. Ethan found a job with better hours, better pay, and most importantly, more time to be a father. He's different now, lighter, freer, like a weight he didn't even realize he was carrying has finally been lifted. He spends weekends taking the kids to the park, helping them with their school projects, being present in a way that was impossible before. The kids are in therapy, and while they do miss their mother, it's not as much as you'd expect. Maybe it's because, deep down, even they sense the distance she always kept between them. Maybe they recognize that her love came with conditions, with expectations they could never meet. Or maybe it's just that, for the first time in their young lives, their home feels like a safe, stable place. As for my parents, well, they finally swallowed their pride long enough to apologize. I could tell it wasn't easy for them. Admitting they had been wrong after years of enabling Sophia's behavior must have been like pulling teeth. For a while, I almost let myself believe that this could be a fresh start, that maybe we could rebuild something from the wreckage Sophia left behind. Then they asked me for $20,000 to help her get back on her feet. I shouldn't have been surprised. Of course, they still saw me as the reliable one, the one who always had the means to fix things, to clean up after Sophia's messes. They still believed that family takes care of each other, even when certain members of that family had done nothing but take. I just laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Not bitter, not angry, just done. Then I told them, help her with your own money. They didn't like that answer. My father got defensive, talking about family loyalty and doing the right thing. My mother tried a different approach, her voice softer, saying, but she's still your sister. But you know what? That doesn't mean anything anymore. I haven't heard from them since. No phone calls, no guilt-tripping texts, no half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. And that's fine. I've spent too many years setting myself on fire to keep others warm. I'm done. And for the first time in my life, I feel absolutely no guilt about it. This story serves as a harsh but necessary reminder: kindness is not infinite, and family does not always mean love and unconditional support. Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the very ones who exploit our goodwill the worst. Ethan and his kids have finally found peace, but at the cost of a deep betrayal from the person who was supposed to love them the most. And as for me, I've learned that cutting off toxic relationships isn't a loss. It's a liberation. So, what do you think about this story? Have you ever been in a situation where your kindness was taken advantage of? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Because life always has lessons worth telling.